joined, I think people thought I will be taking the training.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'm not going to teach you React. I am here to learn as well. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining in the training. I think this batch also is sold out one. So I think, yeah, first time we are having some React training, and I think this is going to be good. And we have Nikhil who has built Raven. He has built Raven with Frappe backend and React. So he's like the go-to person for if React and Frappe thing is your thing. And yeah, welcome once again. And I hope you enjoy the training. Over to you, Nikhil.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Susan. So, hey everyone, welcome to this uh, course batch, whatever you want to call it. Uh, First things first, please do not hesitate to ask questions if you want to. And in the chat, you'll see Janvi and Prathamesh. Both of them also work on Raven and other React plus Frappe stuff. So they'll be there to answer your queries. So just drop your messages on the chat as and when you have them, right? So I've already shared like an agenda of sorts, right, via an announcement. So I just wanted to know first, how many of you have actually worked with React separately as well as Frappe plus React? Because I want to gauge, where do we start, right? Do we start from the very basics of React? Because the course that Hussein took for Vue.js, he took us all the way from, like basics of Vue.js to Frappe UI. Do you want the basics of React, or do you want to dive directly deep into React plus Frappe? So, yeah, looking for feedback. Okay, not used React, not used Frappe before. Okay, uh, yeah, Rafael.
Hi again. Yeah, I would like a quick introduction to React and how to integrate it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, like just the basics to get started. But
okay,
yeah, can be quick. Don't need to dive too deep into that.
right. I think most people over here have very little knowledge of React. Frappe is big, right? So I think for Frappe, if you haven't used Frappe before, then you would need to, uh, probably take a course on Frappe School itself. It's available, right? Hussein has a complete boot camp, 3-day boot camp available. That should be good to, start with Frappe. But I think, okay, we'll start with the basics of React. Won't go very deep into it. Um, but one of the main things that that is like sort of going to be the takeaway from this course is that we will try to build really really great apps, right? But without the restrictions of, let's say, jQuery, right? That's kind of the goal. So yeah, I think Hussein has already shared a link for learning Frappe. Good with Frappe, want to know React plus Frappe. Perfect. So here's what we'll do. Let me share my screen and let me wait. Which one should this be? Yeah, okay. Okay, just let me know if you can see my screen. You can,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Too many folders.
Yeah, too many for yeah. Okay. Uh, So here's where we'll start, right? I'll just bring up my terminal. So everyone already knows about. Um, let's see, how can I move so many of these windows? Okay, that's gone. Perfect. Yeah. So we already know what Frappe is, right? Uh, okay, bringing more windows over here. Cool. So Frappe is a full stack framework, right? Gives you the back end, gives you the front end, has a lot of moving pieces. They call it batteries included. right? Problem statement is that I want to build great looking user interfaces quickly without the pains of Bootstrap and jQuery, right? That's where, something like a React or a Vue.js comes in. Uh, what do I mean by, without the pains of jQuery and Bootstrap? Well, first of all, Bootstrap is, well, very, very, 10-year old, you know, uh, tech, right? It's not, extremely easy to actually make, great looking user interfaces, especially reusing components or reusing pieces of user interface. The other thing is that, it's incredibly difficult to actually wire up jQuery logic. Uh, Case in point would be if you look at ERPNext and you look at any of their accounting modules, for example, right? The amount of side effects that have been written, right, just to handle the complexities of jQuery is incredibly difficult. So, an example would be, let's say that if you were on a form, uh, and let's say that you have two fields, right? And if one of those fields, maybe I have something over here, yeah. So let's say if one of those fields changes and then you need to make a change to another field, right? There's a lot of code that you actually need to write to do it. Whereas in new libraries or new frameworks like Vue.js and React, it's much more simpler because everything is state driven, right? As soon as the state changes, the entire UI re-renders. That's essentially what the tech behind both Vue.js and React is, right? This is a very high level overview, but the idea is that for any website, you need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, three building blocks. That's all you need, right? What React does is that it will, instead of painting, let's say you want to paint this button, instead of painting this button directly to the browser first, right, and letting the browser do its thing, that's what we call the DOM. It will maintain everything in a virtual DOM, right? What a virtual DOM is nothing but like this large object tree, and whenever there's a change in the virtual DOM, then only will it, React will do something called as a reconciliation and a re-render, wherein it will then update to the browser. That actually saves, CPU cycles, etc. Now, having said all of that, uh, I don't know how much we can go with like basics of React, but I think when we actually write code, I'll cover that because otherwise, me giving a lecture about React is not really going to help anyone. So, what we'll do is that we'll start with, uh, you know, how do we use React with Frappe, right? In in my experience, there are three ways, right? One way would be actually technically just two ways. One is that you host your React app somewhere else, right? So let's say if this is, Raven dev.frappe.cloud, I might use this as a backend and then host my React app on some other URL, right? That is a good strategy, especially if you're using like server rendering frameworks like Next.js, right? Only caveat is that for all the authentication, etc., you'll have to use token-based auth. Either that's like literal token-based or OAuth. So that's one way. The other way is that you can actually serve the React app itself or the React front end from your Frappe site. So in this case, I think this has Raven. So if I go to slash Raven, it should open up, Raven, and this is React, right? So now how does that work? Let me pull up a classic Frappe app like Raven itself, right? Okay. So now this is a standard Frappe app, right? Uh, Raven is the name of the app, and if I collapse all the folders, this is a very standard Frappe app. If you wanted to create a web page, right, what you can do is that you can just go to www folder and over here just add an HTML file And if you go to that path, so for example, if I go to /raven, and go to that path, it will render that page, right? All of your assets are stored in the public folder, right? So all of your JavaScript, CSS, other things, they are all stored in the public folder. So the idea really is that, what if I build my React app separately, right? Like, code it separately, and then during the build process, whatever the output is, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, what if I'm able to somehow, dump that output into the public folder of the app, as well as the www folder of the app, right? So this HTML file and all the assets are stored over here. That's literally it. What that would do is that, see, at the end of the day, right, even React compiles down to vanilla JavaScript, right? All you need to do is take that vanilla JavaScript, dump it over here, and and serve it. And that's how you can make, let's say, a React or a Vue.js app run on a separate path. You might have seen this with new apps available on by Frappe as well, right? So Frappe CRM, Insights, all of them run on a separate path. So whatever your site /CRM/Insights, and similarly /Raven. Even Frappe Cloud is built using Vue.js. So how do you do that? Well, so Hussein created a library called Doppio, which I'll have to search. Yeah. So Doppio is a Frappe app, right? But this Frappe app doesn't really have any doc types or anything. It just has commands. And this can help you to create a single page app, right? In fact, even if you wanted to like embed React or Vue inside Frappe itself, that is inside this interface, you can do that using Doppio, right? That's over here creating desk pages. So you can read the documentation for this. We'll use Doppio to set it up, and then we'll look at what Doppio did to actually set up that app, right? So let's actually start from the very basic. Let's set up our bench, the most complicated part. Let me bring up my terminal. Okay, I'm going to go. This is visible, right? Or should I increase my font size? Maybe this.
Visible.
Cool. So we're going to create a new bench, right? So bench in it, and I'm going to stick to version 15 for everything, primarily because version or the develop branch might have some breaking changes or something which I'm not aware of. So just going to stick to version 15 for this training. So bench init React training. Right, and then I can set my Frappe branch to version 15. So this will, set up bench. Those who are not familiar with bench, again, refer to the training for Frappe framework, right? Okay, Hussein is saying maybe we can build a small React app without Frappe first. Okay, I think, okay, I guess we can do that. I'll have to go and open up Wheat. Okay, so let's see. Look at React. Okay, Hussein, do you know if Stack Blitz requires an account or not? Because then I can just code over here. That seems much more easier.
I think to like save you will require an account.
Right, so I don't
Otherwise,
need to save, right?
try
Okay,
typing in code area.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, perfect. So okay, let's actually cover a little bit of the basics in React. React is mostly JavaScript, right? And by mostly, I mean that you'll see that this looks a lot like HTML. Uh, it technically is HTML, but it's not. It's JSX, right? So let me actually remove all of this and let's think about components, right? So in React, what we do is that if I go into this main.jsx file, right? So again, you'll see that the file names end with .jsx, right? That's just, a JavaScript, uh, what can we call it? Like XML-like-ish syntax that the React team created, right? What you'll notice is that if I go to index.html, there's only this one div, right? On line number 10, div ID equals to root. And then there is a script which is loading that main.jsx. So, and if I go to main.jsx, what it's doing is that it's taking that root, right, that div, and it's using React DOM, creating the root, and then rendering this. This is again more JSX. Um, all in all it's doing is that it's taking the div, and on the entire page you only have that one div, right? And it's looking at all the React code, compiling it, and saying, okay, whatever is in this React code, just dump it onto this div. That's all it's doing. So will you please increase? Yeah, I can. Is that better? Hopefully, yeah. Okay. So all it's doing is that, right? Now, why did they create like a JSX type syntax? Well, because they wanted the if you go by the React team's version, they wanted to make it very seamless to control your markup and your logic, right? What I mean by that is that your logic and your markup are in the same place. I'll give you an example. So let's say that this is a standard JavaScript function, right? I can return what is essentially an HTML element, but it's actually JSX, right? And I can say hello. See? So that's I mean, what they are doing in the background is that they look at this JSX, right, and they create an object tree out of it, and they have this massive tree. Always remember that painting to the DOM directly, to the browser DOM directly, is much more expensive than doing some object computation in memory. So that's what they try to do. In jQuery, the developer, or jQuery or vanilla JavaScript, the developer is actually responsible for rendering to the screen, right? So if I want to change this text to hello, hello to world, right? I'll have to pick up this DOM element, uh, and then then trigger, then change it, and what that means is that in the entire life cycle, right, when your app gets more and more complex, right, it won't be as performant. I mean, it can be if like a JavaScript ninja or something, but usually it's not as performant as, let's say, a React or a Vue, just because of the fact that React and Vue are smart about how they change or how they re-render certain pieces of the UI, right? So for to get a primer on this, on how let's say both React or Vue work, right? Hussein's course on I think day one he covers this, right? For Vue.js has the perfect explanation, right? I won't go very deep into this, but I would assume that you know the basics of component-based frameworks like React and Vue, right? So what I mean by keeping the logic and the syntax similar, right, or in the same place, is that let's say that if I want to render a button over here, right, and I say that in my button change text. If this were okay, it's already got some styling, huh? Okay, so if this were It doesn't have auto closing tags. Okay. Yeah. If this was JavaScript and you wanted that on click of this button, you would need to change this text to world, right? Then what you would have to do is that you would give this button an ID or something, right? Then listen to its changes using an event listener, right? Wire up that event listener, then give this particular p tag an ID, right? And then just say get element by ID, and then then change the text using inner HTML or inner text, whatever, right? In React, it's pretty simple. I can just create something called as a state, and I'll say that initially my state is hello, right? And this use state is something we call as a hook, right? A hook, if you see the word use, right, then you'll know that it's a hook, right? In fact, you can also create your own custom hooks which need to start with the word use, right? So you have text and set text, right? What I can do is that instead of, hello, I can say text over here. And oh, sorry, wrong syntax. Yeah. So with the single curly braces, right, I have now rendered whatever was in my state. What that means is that on my button, now I can say on click, right? So this is equivalent to an event listener, right? Which in and out, it is just crazy that the amount of code that you have to actually write to change the text is so little, right? So if I now do this, see, it's world, right? And I can, yeah, that's a very quick, introduction of React. Um, I can create a to-do list as well. I think that'll give you more idea, but uh, one of the main benefits of React is not just the wiring up of event listeners and the performant re-rendering, right? But it's also the componentization of your entire UI, right? To-do list is a great example to handle that. So let me say that, let's actually get rid of this button. Let's say that we have add, right? We create an input of type text. So we have this add button, and then let's say that I create a state of to-dos. To-dos, set to-dos, and let it be a array, right? Because we can have multiple to-dos. Now, what I would do with these to-dos is that I will have to render it over here, right? Let's get off, guys. Okay, we will need text, that be there. Uh, but over here for these to-dos, I can say that I want to loop over these to-dos, and by looping over, I need to return an array of JSX elements, right? So remember, all of these are, JSX elements. You can also consider them as individual components, even though these are like native JSX elements, right? Because these are like native HTML elements, button, input, div, etc. But in this case, what I'll do is that I'll map over to-dos, and let me actually seed the data with, a sample to-do. So to-dos, if I just say to-dos over here, right? And okay, see, if I just say to-dos, it actually renders the text over here. And if I say, test2, so it renders the text over there. Why is that? Because see, at the end of the day, this all this return statement needs is JSX, right? And strings are valid JSX. Arrays of JSX components are also accepted. Now, let's say that I wanted like a bullet list or something. I can change this to an unordered list, right? And then in to-dos, I can do to-dos dot map, which is nothing but, goes over each and every element and returns more JSX. I can say that return a list item. List item with the to do. See? And I think I'll get rid of some styling over here because, yeah, okay, perfect. Cool. So, what we did over here was nothing but, render more JSX, right? And this entire thing, this entire statement returns an array of JSX elements similar to this array, right? But now it's rendered within these li tags, and React knows how to handle it. Now, how do we, add to this list, right? So let's look at this input, right? I can say that this input's value is tied to this state, right? So I can say value equals to text, not string. Value equals to text, and I'll get rid of this. Okay. And then, so what that means is that now even if I type, nothing actually gets added because its value is fixed. So next, what we can do is that we can say that on change, we'll get an event. So we need to set the text to e dot target, which is the input element, dot value. Now, see, I'm now able to input some text and update the state. And if I say add, on add, what I can do is that on click, I can say that, okay, whatever is in this state text, go to actually set to dos, right? Now, instead of, I mean, there are two options. One is that I can say dot 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 to dos, the existing to dos, and then comma, whatever is in text, right? So text. 3, yeah, okay. So this is one option and it seems to work, right? Problem is that this is not the correct way to handle it. The reason being, see what the one of the main reasons why why frameworks like React and Vue are incredibly performant, right? While writing so little code, is that they do something called as reconciliation and batching, right? I don't know about Vue if it does batching, but I'm pretty sure that it has to do some variation of batching. What is batching is basically, let's say that if you had multiple state variables, for example, we have, right? We have text over here and we have to-dos over here. That means that whenever this state changes, and I can only change the state using this, I cannot do something like text equals to, X. Can't do that, right? That's not allowed in React. So the only way to update state is using these, right? Whenever React sees, that there are multiple state updates, what it will try to do is that it will try to hold off the rendering, right? Till it gets a lot of these state updates, batches them together, and then re-renders the app, right? To the human user, it's almost, imperceivable, right? Because it's so fast, but that actually saves a lot of the rendering cycles, right? So it doesn't have to paint to the DOM as often. Now, what that also means is that, while this state is being updated, right? Someone could click on this button, right? Somehow, somewhere, right? Not possible in this example, but somehow, somewhere it can happen. And then what you would need is that I wouldn't need the to-dos, when this button was clicked. I need the to-do when set to-dos was called, right? So I need the set to-dos to be to take the state right then when it's applying the update to the state, right? So instead of doing that, I can actually give it a function where I can say to dos, right? Or I can say, name it better existing to dos. So what that does is that it takes a function now, right? And it returns an array, takes the existing to-dos and appends text to it, right? In terms of behavior, nothing actually changes, but this is the recommended way to update state, right? The other thing that we need to do is we need to clear the text, and we can do that using this. So if I add, see, it's gone now. Uh, so about components, right? Now let's say that, if I was like applying some styling to all of these elements, right? Uh, I mean, I can do it over here, but this is not a very complex component per se. It's just an li element. But let's say if we had an edit button, we had a delete button, you were opening modules for edit and delete, uh, and made it a lot more complex, right? Writing all of the code over here will be insane. That's one. And the other thing is that you know, if I were to use the same list item in some other part of my app, I can't do that. I'll have to copy the entire code and paste it over there. And now let's say if I want to change the behavior on both, I'll have to, maintain like two separate files for that. Uh, Good way to tackle this in component-based frameworks is that you can just create a component called to do item, right? Anything, it doesn't matter. And this can return an li, and this can also take something called as props, right? So in this case, uh, you know let the props be text, right? And then instead of this li, I can actually render to do item, and in text I can pass it t. I mean, if you were to look at this, you would say, what's the difference, right? I mean, this is actually more code. But imagine that this was, a big chunk of code. The other benefit now is that this to-do item, I can use it somewhere else. I can have another component where I'm rendering some other list item. I can use the same thing over there, right? Without having to rewrite logic. So similarly, all of these components, this itself is a component, right? But I can have, let's say, the input and the button to be components. I'll give a good example of these components in Raven, right? Raven. So this is Raven, right? So if you look at this, right, almost everything is a component over here. All of these individual, nav items, you know, they are individual components. If you look at, yeah, if you look at this input box, that's a separate component. In fact, this same input box is used when we try to edit a particular, message or something, right? Again, component-based frameworks allow you to reuse the logic that you have written somewhere else. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Are there any doubts so far? Because otherwise I can spend a day or maybe 2 days just teaching React. So
Sounds good. Thank you.
okay. Okay, I don't think there are any. Yeah, okay, perfect. So, yeah, now let's get back to bench. Why is this open? And why am I paying for it? Okay, so I created that bench, and you can see that it did something, something. Yeah. So I created a bench called React Training, right? Let's actually change our directory to it. Yeah. And this is a standard bench. What we'll do is that we'll get some apps that we know that we need for this tutorial, because we won't be able to set it up later after our site is ready, right? Basically, ERPNext and HRMS we cannot, um, set up after our site. We'll have to, install them before setting up our site. So bench get app ERPNext version 15. And I guess we'll also take HR, maybe. I don't think HR is required for the project management module. Maybe Rafael would know, but uh, we'll take it nonetheless.
Yeah, it's not required.
Yeah. I think HR. Yeah, I think the employee doc type is still in ERPNext, right? Can
Yes.
we keep different version of Frappe in same system? Yeah, I mean you can have multiple benches on your. Are you talking about like on your local machine?
Yes, yes, Nikhil.
Yeah, yeah. You can have multiple benches. Like this is my 26th or 27th bench on this machine. Oh, yeah. And each and every bench, because they have their own Python virtual environment, they can have separate versions. In terms of like apps itself, Frappe, etc., those will be in the apps directory, right? So the bench, each and every bench can have their separate apps. So yeah. Okay, perfect. So I have, gotten ERPNext, HRMS. I'll create a site, new site. Let's call it not Raven.test, React.test, and so this will do nothing but just install Frappe. Then we'll have to install ERPNext and HRMS before going to the setup wizard. Once we have that done, that's when we'll actually start creating our own Frappe app. Okay, I think Prathamesh has already shared all the resources. Hussain has also shared it. How many of you have actually tried React with Frappe? Okay, okay, nice. Bhavik has tried, Richard has tried. Cool. And how did it go? Was it easy or did you face issues? Okay, what I'm going to do, facing issue in design. Okay. For Richard, it was easy. Yeah, I agree. It's fairly easy. Uh, okay, Bhavik, we'll try to cover. I mean, we will definitely cover Tailwind. So I think your problem will be resolved. So yeah, created a site. I'm going to start my bench, right? Before that, I'll actually set it as my default site. React or test. I like setting it to my default site because I really can't keep up with, multiple sites on a bench. You can set up multi-tenancy if you want to, but yeah, bench use React dot. Wait, what is happening? Nope, didn't want to do that. Okay, why do they have to bring in AI everywhere? And close. Okay, so I'm just setting my current site to React.test, right? And then I'm going to do bench start. You will see this must be localhost 9026, right? There's some issue with crypt. Not sure why that would be a problem, but okay, anyway. Let's go to localhost 8026, right? Yes, you can get the recording, yes. So administrator, admin, Yeah, just save. Okay, I'll go through the setup wizard over here. Actually, can this work? I don't think it will work. Nope. And complete setup. Yeah, whatever. Okay. So let this wait. Oh crap! I did not install. Oh boy. Yeah, forgot about that. Jeez. Okay. Rookie mistake coming from me. I got the app. I did not install the app. Right. So, crap. I'll have to drop the site. So I'll say bench drop site react.test, I think. Yeah, it was react.test. Okay, reason being that, ERPNext, like you need to first install ERPNext, then go through the setup wizard. You cannot go through the setup wizard after, like you cannot actually install ERPNext after the setup wizard. Yeah, I said that, but I only did get app, did not do install app, so we'll now have to wait. Um, yeah, I'll share a link of the recording via like an announcement on Frappe School. You'll get it on your email. This is taking some time. Does it usually take this much time? I'm not sure. Okay. Hmm. Raven is a chat app, so it's like Slack, but it's built for Frappe, right? Built using Frappe, built for Frappe, right? So you can have like multiple, your entire organization is already, let's say, running on ERPNext, Frappe HR, etc., right? You can just add Raven to your site, and you don't really have to maintain a separate service, right? So it's all in this one site. Your entire business can actually run in one site. It's basically a chat app, right? But with deeper integrations with Frappe, like all the other apps in Frappe. Hussein, does this usually take this much time? Or maybe I can just create a new site and set that as the current site.
You could have just done like bench reinstall site. That could have done the same thing. So it could like reset the database.
Uh, yeah. But I don't know if
Or
this takes this much time. Maybe.
doesn't like if you use the force flag, it takes, I think, and without backup. I think right now it is taking backup, etc.
No, I think the backup's done, right?
Okay.
See? But
Hmm.
yeah, whatever. We'll just create a new site, right? Bench news, and this time we install React.test in whatever. Okay. Yeah. Also, the installation steps and everything, they're already available on YouTube. I think on YouTube it's covered till authentication. I've shared the link on the announcement, so you must have gotten it on the email. Okay, let's do bench use react.testing. Perfect. And then we'll say bench install app, ERPNext, HRMS. I think I can add multiple apps like this. Yeah. Okay, yeah. To learn React, you can, I think, look at react.dev. This particular tutorial, right? Uh, I think this will, probably help you, learn React. Earlier, this wasn't there, right? The older website for React, I mean, it's not quite as good as Views, but you can learn from here. I don't know if Free Code Camp have updated their React course because they were using class-based components, which are quite old now. Um, the front-end libraries, there's Bootstrap, jQuery. Yeah, I think these are pretty old, so probably not this, but the official documentation on react.dev should be good enough to learn React. This is still going. Hmm. And this is also still going. Crazy. Okay, yeah, I think this is fine, right? This error always comes whenever we install Frappe HR, at least on my local machine. Uh, Basically because bench is not started. Let me now start bench, right? And let me close this. Yeah, okay. And now if I go to localhost 8025, oh, okay, administrator, sorry. Okay. Let's go through this. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, now it's asking for your company, etc., right? So that means that ERPNext is installed. We'll just, name it, I don't know, Acme Corp. That's what Frappe people use. We'll generate some demo data. So while this is happening, right, let's actually create our app. So our bench is running over here. Let that run, right? We'll create a new app. We'll do that using bench new app. And let's call this app, I mean, it's a project management app. The name that I had in mind was Scope. I already have another GitHub repository called Scope because we were doing that on at Frappe Build as well this year. So, but we'll just call it Scope, right? Bench new app Scope, and yeah, app title is Scope, project management, ERPNext, whatever. What AGPL 3.0. I don't need workflow actions for now. Let it install this. I mean, it'll just create it, it won't install it. Okay, yeah, so this setup wizard is done, right? It might have created some dummy data, I believe. If I go to item, etc., right, see, it's created some dummy data. I don't know if it creates dummy data for project or not. No, it doesn't. Okay, cool. So we have, ERPNext Frappe HR running on our site. Now we have created this app, right, called Scope. We'll install this app. We'll say bench install app Scope, and we will do that. Okay, done. If I refresh, yeah, I'll have to restart bench. Yeah. Okay. Now if I go to help, I actually see scope, right? Let's pull up the code base for scope. So if you look at the apps directory, you'll see a new folder called scope, right? So we'll say apps scope, and I'll open a VS Code. Cool. Very simple, Frappe app, right? Like bare bones Frappe app, fresh, doesn't have anything, right? Only has one module with the same name as of the app. Actually, it wouldn't have any modules. It would probably, like, I think, yeah, I think this is fine. Yeah. So we have this app over here, right? This is our Frappe app called Scope. What we'll create using Doppio is nothing but another folder over here which will house our React app, right? I'll give an example in Raven. So you see, Raven is this entire thing is our Frappe app, but more importantly, all of the files, etc., they are inside this Raven folder. We have this front end folder over here which houses our React app, right? All of this is a standard React app. So this was set up using Doppio. That's what we'll do as well, right? We'll first have to get the app. So we'll do bench get app Doppio. That'll work. And then we can just do bench add SPA, right? Because we want to create a single page app. So we'll do bench add SPA. So it asks for a dashboard name. Now this is essentially the path, right? So on which your single page app would run. So for example, for Raven, this would have been Raven. For Scope, we'll keep it as Scope. The only problem is that the folder name will then also be Scope, right? And we already have that. Like if you look at, where is that? Yeah. If you look at over here, right, we already have a folder called scope, so the command will fail, right? I'll just, call it front end for now, right? Uh, and we need this for scope. Which framework do we want? We want React. We want to configure TypeScript. Yes. This tutorial is with TypeScript. It's better, reduces the number of errors that you'll get uh, while you're building the app. So, okay. Now, using Git history, we'll actually see what Doppio does over here, right? What this command does. So, okay, perfect. See, it's created a bunch of files, right? And the first thing that you'll notice is that now we have a front end folder, right? This front end folder is nothing but a standard React app. SRC directory, public directory for your assets, source directory for your actual source code, the other package.json, everything, right? So this is your separate front end. The build or the bundling process is handled by Vite and Rollup. So there's this Vite config file. One thing that you'll notice over here is that there's proxy options set up, right? I'll get into the proxy options in a bit, but before that, let's look at where the build output is stored. Normally, if you create like a React app, the build output directory is nothing but a dist directory or something similar, that is stored within your React app itself, right? And when you host it, you serve your assets from that directory. In this case, what we are telling, Wheat is that, what, after you're done, with the bundling process and you have the final output of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? Dump it into the scope. So dot dot slash. So go back a folder scope, go to public, and store it over here in the front end folder. What you'll notice is that there's no front end folder right now, right? So we need to create a front end folder, right? Over here, and I need to create a folder, sorry, because then the command will fail, right? So yeah, I've created a front end folder, and I'll create a git keep just so that it's checked into source controls. Yeah, okay. Hopefully that works. Or maybe I have it wrong. Maybe we don't need it, but we'll see. Anyway, so what it's doing is that whatever is the output of the React app, right, just dump it into the front end directory over here, right, inside the public folder. What that means is that all those static assets will now be served by Frappe. That's only one part of the equation, right? The other part is the www folder over here, right? What to do about this? Uh, so for that, you'll notice that in package.json, right, this is not just Vite build, but we are setting up a base path, right, which points to that directory, and then we are running this copy HTML entry. What this is doing is that it's looking at the index.html file in the front end directory, right, and then copying it to the www directory frontend.html, right? So it'll actually copy it over here, right? If you look at Raven, in Raven, you'll see that the www this has raven.html, right? But we haven't checked it into source control, right? But that's why it's a little grayed out. I don't know if you can see that, but this is essentially what's happening is that when the build process happens, dump everything into the public directory and then copy over that index.html file that you generate, right? This index.html file, copy its contents and keep it in the raven.html, or in our case frontend.html file. What we would like to do is that instead of calling it front end, we would like to keep uh, the name of the file as scope.html, right? So I want this name to be scope.html. The folder can be front end, makes sense, but this needs to be scope.html. That's one thing that we've done. Now the other thing is that how do we handle routing, right? So because this change in package.json, what that means is that if I go to my site slash scope, the React app is served. But we know that your React app is not going to run on just one URL. You can have multiple URLs in it, right? So how do we handle that? The other thing that Doppio does is essentially set up that routing over here, right? So it says that if I see slash front end slash whatever path, but it's not front end in our case, it's scope, you know, anything that's after scope, right, route it to scope. That means that React can handle the routing for us, right? Do not, worry about the routing by, the Frappe, Frappe won't actually worry about the routing, right? It just says, from route to, wait, from route, any path that you see, just route it to scope. And then the React app can handle the routing. Similarly, if you look at Frappe itself, Frappe also does the same thing because Frappe's desk interface is also a single page app. It does the same thing for the app path as well. Okay, so that's what it did. If I look at some other, so there are a lot of things in the front end folder, which is nothing but the standard, React app. The only things that were needed was this package.json, wherein now when we build the entire Frappe app, right, during bench build, uh, it will actually execute this package.json, wherein it says post install, change directory to front end, and then yarn install. And during the build process, change directory to front end and yarn build, right? So what that would do is that, in our build process, the React app also gets built as that output of that build process will then go into the scope apps public folder. And then from there, the HTML entry is copied over to the www directory, right? And that's how the app will get served, right? We can try this out. Let's go to our, and let's say bench build. Something might not work. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I'm missing a step or something, or maybe the React app, I haven't installed everything in it. All of this will go fine. Let's wait for scope. Okay, perfect. So I think that seemed to work. Um, let's go here. So yeah, scope's installed and everything. Let's try this. Yeah, see, you have a sample React app now running. This is being served by Frappe's main server itself. So your backend and your front end are on the same URL, right? So if I go into front end src app.tsx, it's got a bunch of errors. That's just ESLint being crazy. Let's not worry about that now. But if I remove, let's say something, the problem is that if I refresh, that doesn't go away, right? There's no hot reload. Every time, okay, every time I would have to do a bench build, right? Which is kind of nuts. Uh, that's not a good developer experience at all. Let me close this. Yeah. If I bench build and then I, go back, okay, go back. Should have worked, right? Yeah, should have worked. Hmm, interesting. Okay. Why is it still serving this? Is it cached or something? Maybe it is. I mean, I have scope.html over here. Hmm. Let's see. I think we disable the cache over here. Yeah. I have to make a context file. Okay. So I don't know if that's the issue, but that certainly seems to be the issue. I'm going to create a context file, right, with the same name. Uh, if you're not familiar with this, just look at Frappe Frameworks docs. And then I'm just going to set it to no cache. I don't know if that works, but let's see, where is this? No, not this one. Yeah, nope, it doesn't seem to work. Hmm, does anyone know why that's not working? Why it's not updating? Control Shift R. I mean, I did do that. Says not found. I'm sorry. Yeah. Hmm. This seems to work. Okay. It says not found. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's definitely some caching going on over here. So it's not able to load this JavaScript file. Uh, Let me build the app again. Front end public front end assets. Public front end assets. Yeah, that seems to be correct. And okay, let's see.
In the sites, this file may not be there for some reason.
Yeah, but why is it not there? It should be there. Maybe I changed something, right? I changed the name or something. So it's assets scope. Yeah, that's correct. The app name, then front end, then assets. So let's look at the build output, right? Public front end assets. That seems to be correct. Yeah, this seems to be correct in my opinion. I'm entirely sure why that wouldn't work. If I go for all, I mean the CSS file is loading, so what's the problem with this? Okay, the JS file is named different, but okay. I think this is a problem with some sort of cache, maybe. No, yeah. I don't know where this is. This is not the path, right? The build output that we are serving on scope.html is this one, index rdghch blah blah blah, right? Whereas over here it's this. So come on, shift R. Yeah. Let me restart bench. Yeah, okay. Now it seems to work. Definitely a cache issue from Frappe, right? So it's serving the cached asset. We'll enable developer mode, that should go away. And anyway, we won't be using this way. But uh, okay, now the problem with this approach is that if I make a change over here, I'll have to make a change build. That's not the ideal way, right? So what we can do is that we have this bench server running on localhost port number 8026. In your case, it might be 8000, right? We'll go into our React app. So I'll go into front end, right? And then I'll do yarn dev. So I'll start a separate server altogether. This is a React dev server, right? This is what we'll use to test. So let's go to localhost 8080. Yeah. So this is the, oh man, why am I clicking there? Yeah. So this is the React dev server. So now we have two servers, right? We have localhost 8026, we have localhost 8080. What I usually do is that I keep this active on my desk interface, right? And I keep this active over here, right? So we always start two servers, right? There is some, yeah, this is some wheat issue. You can ignore this, right? This won't show up in production. This also happens on Raven for some reason. So yeah, and the only problem with this is that both of them are running on different ports, right? This is running on 8080, this is running on 8026. So your backend is on 26, your React dev live server, and by live I mean like literally live. So if I remove this, goes away immediately, right? So your live server is on 8080. When I make API calls, it will go to localhost 8080 slash, let's say, API method, the path to your method, right? So that's a little tricky, right? How do we solve that? luckily in our dev environment, right, on a production environment, it won't be a problem because both of them will be running on, the same URL, right? Whatever your site URL is. But for our dev environment, that's why if you remember, there was this proxy options, right? So on our live server, we are saying use port 8080. And for proxy, use this proxy options. If I go to proxy options, you will see it's bringing up the common site config. From the common site config, it's bringing up the web server port, and then it's setting up, it's saying that any request to slash app, API, assets, files, or private, right? Just redirect them to localhost, whatever that port is, whatever the port we have set in common site config is, right? So this is sort of a proxy that Wheat offers, right? Forget about the errors. Those errors are usually because of TypeScript, right? Especially the new version of TypeScript on Wheat config as well as on proxy options. But yeah, so that's proxy options for you. And I think we've covered the setup now. I mean, that's all you need to do to actually set up a React app with Frappe. You'll see that there is a Frappe provider setup from Frappe React SDK that gets inbuilt with Doppio, right? Whenever Doppio was installed, the React app is installed with Frappe React SDK inbuilt. We'll cover we'll cover Frappe provider in a bit, right? But basically, it stores all of the necessary information that you need, right? I think what we'll do is that we'll commit all of this, but before that, we need to ensure that we are not, adding the build outputs to our Git repo, right? So for that, we'll go to git ignore, right? And in git ignore, we'll say that just ignore whatever is in scope slash public slash front end, because we don't want that if you have 10 developers, all of these developers are building, right, sometime, and then that gets checked into source control. Kind of pointless to do that, right? So build outputs don't get, so if I add that, that takes away a lot of this. And then I also need to, remove scope.html from there. So scope slash www slash scope.html. Don't need that in my Git. Save it. What else do we not need? I think everything else is fine. We need all of this. So we can commit. We can say setup React SPM. Okay, I'll have to set up Git. Oh, till then, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay. Yeah, anyone has any questions?
Maybe I didn't catch that, but how did you set up the hot reloading if you set it up?
Yeah, okay. So I have two servers, right? One is our bench server that runs, right? And what I did was I basically went to the directory of my app. So this is my bench, right? I went to app and then my whatever my Frappe app was, right? And over here, I then changed my directory to the React app, right? So the React app is front end. And in our package.json in front end, right, you'll see that we have, let's see, package.json here. See, we have this script set up as Wheat, right, dev. So that's all I did. I just ran yarn dev. What that does is that it creates another server, basically another URL. So our front end runs on 8080. And this is only for dev environments, not for like production. on production because the build output gets served by Frappe itself, right? But for a dev environment, you would need to do this. And this is, it has a hot module reloading from Vite. So it then works like a regular React app. In fact, after this setup is done, you will actually never realize that you're working on a Frappe app, right? Because it's a standard React app, the build process just, dumps it into Frappe.
Right. But you couldn't access it under the Frappe URL /scope then?
Yeah, that's the problem, right? So it would be a separate port. The port changes. I mean, it's still localhost, but the port changes, right? But because the port changes, now all of the API requests that go to 8080, they actually need to be proxied to your actual web server, right? Your Frappe server. And that's what we have configured in vconfig.ts.
Right, okay.
So all Vue.js apps that are there by Frappe, like Frappe UI does the same thing, right? All of them do the exact same thing. In fact, I learned it from them, right? I just swapped Vue with React, that's it.
All right.
No, Doppio allows you to set up a React app. It allows you to set up a Vue app as well. And it also allows you to set up a single page, like on your desk interface. If you want a particular page to run React or Vue, you can also do that, right? Frappe React SDK comes by default. It's the recommended approach, but you can also just uninstall Frappe React SDK from here, right? It doesn't really have any bearing to the React app itself. Like you can also, build it without React SDK. So yeah. Do we have more questions? Okay, so I guess what we'll do is that we'll enable developer mode. What's the command to enable developer mode? Bench set config, yeah. Developer mode 1, right? So that's the first thing that we need to do. We need to set developer mode to 1. Uh, can you explain the routing? Okay, yes, I can. So see, single page apps like Vue or React, right? The routing is actually handled by via JavaScript. It's not handled by the browser, right? So for example, if you go to, slash Raven, actually, let me show that. Yeah. So look at the URL over here, right? It says slash Raven, and then anything after that, right? This needs to be handled by React, right? It's a single page app after all. It's not server rendered or anything. So uh, the problem is that if you were to, if you were to not set up the routing in hooks.py the way that, that Doppio does, right? Uh, the Frappe web server will actually attempt to take this URL, right? And we'll look for a file called testing notification in this case, right? Testing notification.html in their www directory. And they won't find any, obviously. And so it will give you a 404 error. Uh, the way that the routing works is that in hooks.py, we've just said website route rules, right? Anything that, if you go to slash scope or anything after slash scope, just route it back to scope. That's it. That's all we are doing. And React router, so we'll use React router for this, right? React router will be able to take that path and render your component, right? But we don't want, someone to go directly to that URL and then Frappe throwing a 404 error, right? We want it to, just open up the React router. Is it possible to create React e-commerce app without using So Raven has got nothing to do over here, right? Raven is just an example React app, but Frappe React SDK installation, yeah, it's possible, right? Only use Doppio, yeah. So see, if you wanted to remove Frappe React SDK, just use Doppio, right? Go to your package.json in your front end directory over here, and just remove Frappe React SDK from here, right? Just do a yarn remove Frappe React SDK, and then from your app.tsx just delete this, right? And you'll be done. So Doppio can be used. You don't need Frappe React SDK uh, to actually make like a React app, right? But this entire course we'll be using Frappe React SDK because I mean that's what we work with like every day. So yeah. And for e-commerce specifically, so the problem with single page apps is that they are not really good for SEO, right? Because like Google's search engine, it tries to crawl that URL. Let's say you have a product URL, slash my e-commerce app slash, this product. Google's crawlers, etc., they don't really execute the JavaScript, right? So it's not really good for SEO. So for those use cases, you know, like something like a Next.js would be better, even though Next.js is very, very, unstable in my opinion. So yeah, for e-commerce, I would change the strategy. Can we render the div without using JSX? Not with React. With React, you need JSX. Like, I mean, you can render the div, by directly manipulating the DOM, but then what's the point of doing that? Like if you're using React, then you would use JSX. JSX is not very different. Like, this is just HTML. This looks like HTML. It just, there are a few things like an on click, etc. That's JSXE. But like everything else is just HTML. Yeah, so Next.js, like if you go through like version 12 to version 13, right? A lot of breaking changes. The other thing is that self-hosting Next.js is kind of difficult. I think Coolify does a good job with it, but like a lot of the like plugins like the image plugin, etc., they work really well on Vercel's infrastructure but don't really work otherwise. At least that's been my experience, right? And plus, it's new, right? So it's not really that stable, and they keep making changes, to be honest. So, but Next.js is a very good option if you want like SEO and stuff, right? But then you can also look at like something like Remix, but I think Remix is now moving back to React Router. Or React is also introducing server components themselves, so maybe that's also a good option. What if I want to keep the separate auth for React app? Is it possible? Uh, I mean, even with a separate auth, you would still have to authenticate to Frappe, right? So, but it is possible, yes. Like you can authenticate using your own provider, etc., whatever, right? And you'll probably get like a bearer token, and you can pass it to Frappe provider. So you can just pass, use wait, token params, and then pass it over here. Use token to, and then this will be a function that returns a token, right? So you can do this over here, and I think you'll also need to pass the type if you're. I mean, most probably you're using a bearer token, hopefully not the actual token because that's not really safe. But this is how you would do it. In fact, if you were building for React Native, you can also use Frappe React SDK. And in React Native, obviously cookies won't work. So you would have to use token-based auth. And so you will do it the same way, right? Any more questions? Okay, cool. So we have now enabled developer mode. The thing that we need to do is I'll just try to fetch like a list of users, right? Over here. In Frappe React SDK, we have this hook called use Frappe get doc list, right? Um, I'll just try to fetch. So use Frappe get doc list. One, if you're on VS Code or any nice code editor, you should be able to see like inline documentation for all of these hooks, right? So use Frappe get doc list is a hook to fetch a list of documents from the database, right? I've just passed it the name of the doc type, right? And I'll just say data. So let's try running this on our localhost 8080 and see if it works. Right. Is my server running? Yeah, it is running. Okay. And yeah, and as expected, it doesn't work, right? So let me the above error occurred. Cannot destructure property URL of as it is null. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. So, yeah, again, I can't actually use a hook over here, right? Because it's not inside the Frappe provider, right? The Frappe provider is like I can use the hook inside, like a component inside this, but I can't use it over here because the Frappe provider actually, adds all of the context. So what we'll do is we'll create a new component and we call it test component. And we'll do that over here and we'll say return data, right? And I'll just call this test component over here. Let's get rid of this. So it shouldn't work in my opinion. I don't think it will work, right? Because there'll be errors. Objects are not valid. Okay, sorry. Data. Let's actually just render a div for now, but that API call itself shouldn't work, and I don't think it will. Let's see. So you can already see that this error connection refused is coming up, right? Localhost 9000. You can ignore this Vite plugin PWA because this is like just my browser cache, right? Because I run Raven on the same URL, so you can ignore that, but you can see the SocketIO, right? It's throwing an error. Why? Because it's trying to connect at port number 9000, uh, which doesn't make sense because our Frappe server is running on port number 8026. So what we will need to do is we'll need to create an environment file, right, for our local environment. And I can do that using dot v dot en not dot v sorry dot env dot local, right? This is remember that this is in my okay, sorry, this is in my front end folder. Yeah, this needs to be in my front end folder. I'll create an environment variable called Vite socket port. Since this is local, this won't be checked into your source control, right? My socket port is 9026, and in my app.tsx, I'll go into my Frappe provider and I'll say for socket port import.meta.env.Vite socket port. So I think Prathamesh can share the link for Vite's environment variables, how to get that. But all I've done is that I've now set the socket port over here, right? You'll see that that error now goes away, right? Something works. So yeah, okay. Now I've done a hard refresh, so even the Vite plugin PW errors are gone. You'll see that the socket connection will now be established. There must be like a socket connection over here. See, it actually worked. Socket connection is established. That's one thing. It won't work entirely though. The problem is that in version 15, of Frappe and above, right? We also need to provide a site name, right? This won't be a problem on production environments again, because on production environments it will get the site name, like Frappe React SDK will get the site name, but from the URL itself. But over here it won't. So what we'll do is we'll say Vite site name, and what was the name of our site? Was it React.testing? I think it was React.testing. So Vite site name, and I'll say site name is again import.meta Vite site name. Right. So if I look at the original connection, no, not this one. Sorry, I need to look at the fetch request. Yeah. Yeah. So now the site name is also passed. So, that SocketIO namespacing will work, right? Okay. Some errors, yeah, I think maybe because I think we can ignore those for now, right? Yeah, connection refuse, I know about that. The user doc type, I mean, it works, right? It's able to fetch the users. Uh, so that request, if you look at the request, it's API resource user. That seems to work. Uh, One thing that we do for our local environments is that we set up, CSRF. We tell Frappe to ignore CSRF, and we tell Frappe to allow cores as well. Uh, so let's actually do that. So we'll go to sites, right? And then we'll open up common site config. In common site config, we'll say, now this is only for your development environments, right? Allow cores, we'll say star, because our request is coming from 8080. So we need to, ignore cross origin requests, right? That's the first thing. The other is we need to ignore CSRF on our local environments only, not on production, right? Because if you look at how CSRF works in Frappe, is that your Frappe site, when Frappe serves it themselves, you look at, there'll be a, don't see it over here. There'll be a CSRF token somewhere over here that they add, or I can just open up scope, the built site of scope. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, look at over here, right? So it sets the CSRF token over here. Now, but on our local environment, we won't have that, right? On our local environment, we won't get a CSRF token simply because, well, it's not being served by Frappe. So we need to ignore CSRF as well over here. So we'll say Control O, Control X, and I'll just restart bench. Okay, now localhost 8080. Yeah, there seems to be one of these errors where it says session ID unknown. Not sure about this, but everything else seems to work. So we are able to, get a list of users by making a request. We'll get into the hooks later, right? But so far, is there any question? Am I going too fast, too slow? You can also share that. Okay. Hey man, if it's fast for Rafael, then it's almost fast for everyone. Okay, Rafal, is there anything that you did not understand, or you want me to, again explain?
It's just that I'm trying to follow along and
Oh,
don't catch
okay.
anything a
Yeah.
bit. Uh, um,
But were you able to
so
follow
yeah,
along till now?
mostly I'm still setting up the environment. Can you show your environment at local again?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's just the side. Perfect. And where did the socket port come from?
The socket port will be so whatever your URL, like whatever your main Frappe web server port is, it's just the 9 version of it, right? So in my case, it's running on
Yes.
8026. So socket would be on 9026.
Ah, yeah, right. Okay, so that's from your common site config usually, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, I think then I got it mostly.
Yeah. Did you set up your Frappe provider?
Yes.
We don't really need to worry about this part, like the get doc list, because we still have a long way to go there. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? Any questions? Because after this, we're just, going to, I mean, we're just going to install library after library, right? I think that's probably going to take more time. So, because now we have a React app set up, so we can just go, and then just continue with our process. So, any questions? Okay. How many of you have worked with shadcn? Does reverse proxying causes any issue with the CSR? No, on it's the proxying is only for the local environment, right? Not for the production environment. On the production environment, the site is served by Frappe itself. So only for the local environment, and on the local environment, we don't really care about the CSRF token. So so because we don't have a CSRF token on our local on our React web server. If you look at localhost 8080, this is being served by Wheat. It's not being served by Frappe. Okay, I'll give you why that happens, right? So in index.html, there's this script that was added by Doppio. See, window.csrf token is equal to frappe.session.csrf token. Um, the reason why this was added is because we need the CSRF token on production when we make any API call. That's a security measure in Frappe, right? When Frappe serves this particular index.html, right, it will just like Jinja, and this you can see is Jinja syntax. So this curly brace and frappe.session.csrf token gets replaced with the actual CSRF token, right? But when this index.html file is being served by the Wheat server on our local environment for our hot module loading, right? Uh, we don't have a CSRF token. So that's why we need to ignore CSRF token when we are in our local machines. The other thing is that if you look at Raven's index.html, we have actually done we've added more things over here. So we've also added boot, right? We have added app name for some other feature, but we have added boot. Reason being that up until version 14 for translations, you needed the boot, right? But now you actually need to fetch the translations and then handle it in your app. Um And we also need the boot for a lot of things, for like system settings, for user settings, it's like some defaults, etc. Like if you were, especially if you were like building on top of ERPNext and HR, etc., they have a lot of pages where they use things from the boot. So we serve this boot from the raven.py file, right? We get the boot, get boot data for guest, for normal users, for logged in users, we get the boot data, right? And then we set it in the context. And again, similar to Jinja, that just gets replaced. Where is that? Index.html. Yeah, that just gets replaced over here in these curly braces. So that's good to know if you are using, especially if you're using like, if you're building on top of ERPNext, you'll come across a situation where you need the boot. So yeah. Any questions? Okay, cool. So how many of you have worked with shadcn? How many of you have heard of shadcn? Yep. So shadcn is a unique component library because it's not really a component library in and of itself, right? But it's more like, okay, here are these open source components, just copy and paste it, right? Unlike other libraries like a Chakra UI or even Radix UI themes, wherein you install those components, you use npm I whatever. Uh, shadcn basically tells you that I'm getting CSRF token issue in React app in production. Are you using cookie-based auth? Uh, are you using Doppio? Like, did you use Doppio to set up your React app? And are you using Frappe React SDK? Perfect. So just check in your index.html whether you have this line or not. I'll show it in scope. So this one, this line. If you have this line, that shouldn't be a problem. Just maybe take like a screenshot or like a photo, and just check if you have this or not. Or if that doesn't resolve the issue, just file an issue on Frappe React SDK's GitHub repo. Okay. Well, I mean, not equals to token, but yeah. So then, Neo just file an issue on Frappe React SDK's repo. We'll look into it. Right. This shouldn't be a problem, to be honest. Okay. So shadcn is a weird library per se because what it does is that it makes these beautiful components, but then it gives you the code, right? It is actually built on top of RadixUI's primitives, right? Along with Tailwind CSS. So Tailwind CSS is a library, it's a pretty unique library in the sense that it can be used on any framework, right? It's just CSS after all, but it's actually, Tailwind CSS, the way it works is that it exposes all of these attributes via classes, and then the Tailwind compiler during the build process, it will go through all of these classes, see what you have used, and only add that into your final CSS file, right? Unlike traditional HTML and CSS where you create those classes yourself, right? Tailwind already has a list of classes. So this is very Bootstrap-like, right? But in Bootstrap, you have to load the entire CSS file that's loaded by Bootstrap, right? This actually minifies, like it just doesn't minify by removing the spaces, etc. It actually strips out all of the unused classes and only ships in the final CSS only ships what is needed. How does Radix compare to Tama GUI? Worlds apart, right? First of all, Radix is way better, right? And Tama GUI is primarily built for React Native, right? It supports web, but that's like saying, okay, React Native for web, right? How good is React Native for web compared to just React for web? So, yeah, Tama GUI, we are using Tama GUI for Raven's mobile app, uh, but Radix and TamaGUI are very different. In fact, Radix has two parts to it. One is primitives, right, which are unstyled components, and then there is themes, which is more like a component library, which are styled and stuff. Raven uses Radix UI themes. Um, shadcn takes primitives, then applies CSS classes or Tailwind classes to it, and then gives us this. So we'll first set up shadcn, right? And so in installation, let's go to Vite. Let me see if the VS Code, yeah, we do not have any changes. So we'll see what shadcn also does, right? We need to first install Tailwind. One thing that you need to note is that we're using yarn. We're not using NPM, uh, right? So we'll actually use the installation steps for yarn. So let's go to our terminal. Okay. Set up socket for local DNV. Okay, let's go to, yeah, this is my React server, right? Let's clear this a little bit. Okay, I'm going to say yarn add and then paste this. So we only need Tailwind CSS, etc. on like it's a dev dependency, right? So we do that. Then we need to initialize Tailwind. Yeah, so now it's created a Tailwind CSS config file and a post CSS config file, right? So these two commands, you can find it in shadcn's installation for Vite. We need to follow the Vite installation steps. So we install Tailwind CSS, post CSS on and auto prefixer. These three things are needed for Tailwind and shadcn to work. And then we did Tailwind CSS init. What are the files that I've changed? First of all, package.json, it's added all of those dependencies. That's one. It's created a Tailwind config.js file, right? It's empty for now. And it's created a post css.config.js file. That's also empty basically. So that's done. Then we need to edit our tsconfig.json file, right? And we'll add this compiler options over here. I'll tell you what this does. This is actually pretty cool. Let's go to tsconfig.json file. Yeah. Preferences, compiler options. Okay. What this does, right, is that when we're importing files, usually you would you would use relative URLs for everything, right? So if I'm on app.tsx or if I'm on main.tsx and I want to import app.tsx, I do /app.tsx, they're in the same folder. If I have like multiple folders and stuff, it gets complicated. So, that tsconfig.json, this path, what it would do is that now I can, import like this. I can say at, and this should work, right. Um, yeah, this should work. So let's see. tsconfig. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, okay, my web server is not running right. Let's actually run that. Yarn dev. Yeah, it does work. So, yeah. Now, this doesn't seem like a big deal now, but when you have like very, very big apps, just using an import statement like @ slash, is much better than, relative imports, because if you were to, change the components location somewhere, it's much easier. So that was one. Compiler options is done. Okay, we did this, right? Okay, in tsconfig.json we added. We did not add it in tsconfig.app.json. So tsconfig.json we have added this. In tsconfig.app.json we need to add in compiler options this. Yeah. And if I go to main.tsx now maybe it will not throw an error. Because, yeah, see, it doesn't throw an error. So another way of import, but especially for like very large complex apps, it's the recommended way. And also shadcn uses that, so we anyway need to do that. So all it does is it sets the base URL and the paths, right? The path is like anything after @ just look in the src directory. Then we need to go to readconfig.ts. I'll install this using yarn add node. That's done. And then I think our read config is fine. Yeah, we already have this at directory src. This is already there, so we don't need to do anything. Yeah, so this is there. And then we need to install shadcn. So whoever is following, do I slow down or do I continue? Continue. Okay. So we're going to initialize shadcn, and again, remember all of these commands that I'm doing it in my front end folder. So that is my React app, right? I'm not doing it in my Frappe main folder, the main app folder, right? I've gone into the React app and I'm doing all of that. Okay. Would you like to use TypeScript? Yes. Which style would you like to use? I don't know. Which one looks better? New York or default? Maybe New York? Uh, okay. I guess we'll use New York. We'll use Slate. Okay, now our global CSS file is not there. Our global CSS file is in a different place, which is index.css, right? So this is our global, file. We need to change this file. So we'll do src/index.css. Just follow the steps on Veet's site. Would you like to use CSS variables for colors? I don't know, maybe yes. Are you using a custom Tailwind prefix? We are not. Where is your tailwind config.js located? It's located right there. Configure the import alias for components at slash components. That's what I was talking about. At slash libs utils. Are you using React Server components? No. Write configuration to components.json? Yes. So, shadcn earlier it was copy paste. Yes, this is for React UI screen design. Yes. Uh, Earlier we used to copy paste shadcn's entire configuration, but now they have created this entire utility, right? So just look at the answers that I've given, right? You would need to follow this because it contains some locations to files, etc. So yeah, now look at the changes that shadcn has made. In Tailwind config, it's got like it was empty, right? Earlier, now it's using a bunch of stuff. Then post CSS config, etc. That's fine. In components.json, this is for shadcn, uh, which they've used. Then in ts config over here, there's nothing that's been added. Nothing over here. Index.css, they've basically replaced the entire file, right? So if I open, yeah, so now they've added their colors and stuff over here, right? And you look at utils, and they've created a util called cn. We'll get to it in a while. So they'll need that util to install some buttons, etc., right? If I open up my dev server, maybe just restart the dev server because I've added new dependencies. Yeah, you'll see a lot of the styling is gone, right? That's because the index.css file was changed. So, what to do next? We can add components from shadcn now, right? And we'll need a lot of these components. So, show base shadcn setup, shadcn, and tailwind setup. So I'll add the button component from shadcn, and then we'll use the button component. Okay, cool. Once I did that, right, you'll see that they have added now, in package.json, they've added, okay, from RadixUI, they've added React slot. But the button component is nothing but, styles, etc. Because at the end of the day, it's just a simple, button, right? So, but yes, they have, created this entire variant, etc. Let's look at the documentation for button. So this is how a button looks. We've already done this. Let's import a button. You'll see that this button was added in frontend src components slash UI slash button, right? So let's go to our app.tsx file. And over here, instead of rendering a div, let's render a button. Okay. See, I like to import it like this, but VS Code insists otherwise. Yeah, let's see if that renders on our screen. Where are we? Yeah. Okay. See, we got this button. And in fact, I can actually change this button to the main button. Yep. So we have shadcn loaded. Now we just need to decide what all do we need from here. I mean we have two options. Either we install everything or we install as and when we need stuff, right? I think we'll install as and when we need stuff. Till then, the goal for today and the first half of tomorrow will be to cover authentication. So we'll actually need to create a login page, right? If you look at this localhost 8080, already logged in, right? I can show that to you by, instead of replacing, like I'll replace this with use Frappe auth. Don't worry about this for now. I'll cover that in our authentication state, but current user. But see, it says that I'm logged in as this account. The reason why it says that is, will the recording be available today so we can review for tomorrow? Yes, I will. I'm recording it over here. I also have a Zoom recording that's going on. This recording that I have will be better. So yes, I'll share that with you. So the reason why it says that I'm already logged in is because, see, both of these sites are running on localhost, right? And so cookies, are technically being shared. In fact, you can see that in any network call that we do. Let me look at just fetch requests, right? Look at the cookie that's being sent, right? So see, the cookies are being set because they're all in the same domain, right? So technically we are logged in, and in fact we can actually do without a login page. We can just ask users to use the login page that's available in Frappe and then come over here. Uh, we'll still cover how to build a login page, uh, primarily because on mobile, etc., especially if it's a PWA like Raven is, you would need to build that login page. If you look at Raven's login page, that's the best example because it covers almost everything except for LDAP login. So it covers OAuth, it covers two-factor authentication, and this is all for authentication when it's being served by the Frappe site, right? Not for like a separate site where you're using token-based auth, right? Or OAuth, whatever. But Raven's login page has pretty much all sorts of login, right? Login using magic link, uh, login with username, etc. So you can check that. Let's see. What do we do next? We need to build a login page. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with React Hook Form. Are you familiar with this library? Because I don't want to add a bunch of libraries, but this is the best way to handle forms in React. So how many of you have used this? Would it be okay if we use this, or do you want us to build forms like from scratch using, regular state management in React? Okay, a few people have used it. Most haven't, right? Yeah, because if we like on the login page, we only need two fields, so it's manageable. Let's build the login page without React Hook Form, right? And I'll then tell you the pains associated with it, right? And then let's build the other pages with React Hook Form so that you understand what's the difference between the two. I think that's a better approach, right? So won't install this for now. What else do we need? We need a toast component, not needed now. I guess we don't need anything. We need React Router, but let's build a login page first, right? So let's go here. So what I usually like to do is that, we have this lib folder and you have utils.ts, right? I usually call this folder as utils itself, but whatever, shadcn created that folder. I'll create a new folder called pages, right? We usually need this. And I also create a new folder called hooks, right, which will contain all of our hooks. In pages, let's create a login page. So we'll call it login.tsx symbol, right? And if you use VS Code, there are extensions that I would recommend you to get. One of them is auto close tag, right? Prathamesh, just quickly note and share links if possible. So auto close tag, ESLint, ES7 plus React Redux. Um, you know, can we use Frappe login page for React apps? Yeah, yeah. Like because yeah, like you when the user is logged out, just redirect them to slash login. So yeah, you can. Yes. In fact, for a while, Raven was using Frappe's login page because a lot of our users had like two-factor authentication and stuff, and we didn't support that then. So we actually, just redirected them back to the Frappe login page. So yes, you can use the Frappe login page for React apps. Um, Then I think there are Tailwind CSS intelligence, very much needed. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The reason why I'm saying this is because you can do something like TSRAFCE, right? Rafael, if you're following, just check this, right? If you do this, this comes from the ES7 React plugin, I think, on VS Code, right? And this is a hotkey technically. Am I using the Mac default terminal or some other terminal? I'm using Warp. I don't recommend it particularly, I guess, but it does autocomplete. So I'm using something called as Warp. I think Prathamesh can share that. So TSRAFCE, you do that, and it automatically, generates some boilerplate for you. It creates a component and sets this up for you. So one thing that I'm annoyed by is the fact that you look at these errors, right? These errors are coming. Why? Because in our ESLint lint configuration or in our TS config, we have like or the default configuration comes with no unused variables, right? So you look at this, right? React is declared, but its value is never read. I mean, this is not really an error. This page will still work, but I don't want unused, this to come up as an error. I only want it to be a warning. So for that, let me see if I can get it over here. So it says strict true. In fact, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just copy over this, yeah, sort of thought. So tsconfig.json, it does say strict is true, but mm, mm, wait, what is it using? Look at this, yeah. Okay, it's using ES 2020, and in my linting, it says no unused locals true. I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to remove this. So the two things that I removed from tsconfig.app.json was no unused locals and no unused parameters. Reason, because if I go to my login props yeah, this still needs to not be an error. I mean, I can remove this. This I don't need. But yeah. Okay. So let's see. We have a login, like we have a component that is TS, yeah, okay. we have a login component. It's not really a page, but we'll treat it like a page later when we actually set up routing. But for today, we'll just set up the login page, right? I'm going to delete all of this, just get rid of this, and just call the login component. Okay, I don't need this. Neither do I need this. I don't need this use state. I'm just removing the unused imports. That's it. So we're just going to make the login page today, and it's going to be incredibly easy. So yeah. So what all do we need for the login page? We need a heading that says login, right? uh, we probably need a card, and we need some inputs. So all of these we can get from here, right? We actually need something like this, very close to this. So we'll install this using this command. So I'm going to install card npx shadcn UI at latest add card, right? So that's my card component gets added. Card is done. Then I need to get, if I look at this code base, right? If I look at this code, they have used input, label. I don't need select, but I need the input and label, right? I'll go to input and I'll copy this. So same thing, just input and then same thing and label. Okay. So I've now installed 4 components from shadcn: button, card, input, label, right? Uh, let's see. I go back to card, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to just copy this whole thing, right? This example, the preview, because our login page is going to look a lot like this. So yeah, we're going to take this and I'll just dump it over here maybe. And this card with form just becomes login, and I'll make it into an arrow function because I like it that way. Oh, no. Okay, I don't need select. Let's get rid of select. Wherever we have select, let's get rid of that. Let's copy this for now. And this is my login. So I'll just export default login. Yeah. Okay. I hope you've been able to follow along. All I did was I just, installed card label input from shadcn. Then I copied the card example into the login page, just like that, right? Remove the select import, right? Remove the select field, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions so far? You can create a React app, just create a different React app and that's it. So uh, yeah, I mean, Doppio just does the wiring up with the React with the Frappe app, so that the Frappe site serves the React app, right? You can host the React app on Firebase, on Next.js, whatever. It doesn't really matter. But if you're serving it from a separate URL, cookie-based auth won't work. So you would have to use token-based auth. Cookie-based auth wouldn't work because of security, because I mean, otherwise, one site can use the cookies of another site. Huge security nightmare. So yeah. Rafael, have you been able to follow along so far?
Yes, I think so. I don't know if it's working, but
Okay, I don't know if it's working on my computer as well. Okay, it does seem to be working, yeah. So we do have something over here. I don't know why these are all center aligned. That's weird, right? Because it wasn't center aligned in this example. So something fishy is going on over here. Let's look at elements and let's look at the styles. Where is this getting the text align center from? Item center. Okay, that's the what item center is fine, right? This div is also fine. Is it getting text aligned somewhere? Yeah, it is getting text aligned from somewhere. Yeah. So we have this weird root styling text align center somewhere in our file structure. Now we need to find that. Index.css probably has it. I'm looking at the wrong repo, sorry. Oh, app.css might have it. Yeah. Actually, let's get rid of app.css altogether. Let's delete app.css. From app.tsx, we also need to remove app.css. Okay. Once you've removed app.css, yeah, okay. Now it looks a lot better. We can center it. So let's go to login. Let's wrap it in a div. And let's say that we give it a class name of width screen, right? Height screen. And we need to center align it. So we say flex items center justify center. This is Tailwind. Tailwind is nothing but class names, right? And if you have the Tailwind plugin installed on VS Code, you can hover over and see what the actual CSS is for a particular class name, right? All I've done is that just make the height 100, VW VH, right, and then just center align the entire card in between. So see, now this is what we have. We can then, say that this is a login page. We'll say log into your account. Maybe something like hello, log into your account, right? And we have these two input fields. We need to change those. So this will be my email or username, whatever it is. HTML4 will be email. Gene.doe@example.com. And then similarly over here, this will be my password, my input. So these are all shadcn components. You can refer to the documentation. The ID and the HTML4 is needed for the simple reason that if I click, I mean, this is for accessibility, right? If I click on the label, this should be highlighted. Really important for screen readers, accessibility in general. So yeah, password. We don't really need a placeholder for password, but what we need to do is we need to mask it. So we'll say that the input is of type password, right? So yeah. Now see, looks good. So once we have done that, we don't need the cancel button. We only need this button and we'll call it login, right? So at least the markup is done. Justify, we'll say end because I want the login button to be on the right side. So yeah, this is your login page markup, right? You'll notice how with with a little bit of shadcn components as well as a little bit of CSS, it looks so much better, right? Now, what we need to do is we need to get the email and password that the user is entering, right? So we'll say const we'll have to create variables, right? So we'll say email, set email equals to useState. Now, if you remember, what did useState do? It just maintained the state of any variable. This useState can hold anything. It can hold objects, arrays, it can hold strings, numbers, whatever. Any variable, it's just a state. When that state changes, and by change, I mean a shallow comparison change, right? So if a string or a number or a boolean, these change, the component re-renders. But if, let's say, if it's an object and if it's a deeply nested object, right, it will only compare till the first level. It won't compare after that. So that's what is called as a shallow comparison. So just remember that. In this case, we'll just create two state variables. Password, set password equals to useState. Right? By default, both of them are empty. And now what I'll do is that I'll wire up the inputs. So in my input, I'll say value is equal to email, right? And on change e, like this is a function, right? I get the event for the change event, right? And then I need to do set email e.target.value. Similarly, in my password, I need to do the same, right? I need to say value is equal to password, and on change set password. Does this make sense? Any questions so far? Okay, cool. So now when I type, I mean, it behaves the same way, right? But we actually have state. You can actually check that by, just console logging stuff. So email password, right? The component re-renders, and so the console log gets executed. So see? So we have the email and password now, right? Now on clicking on the login button, we need to do something. So let's do that. We'll create a function called handle submit. Right, and I'll print the email password on handle submit, right? So on handle submit, so and then the button for the login, I'll just say handle submit. On click equals to handle submit, right? This is like very basic React. So yeah, but you take the button, you say handle submit, console log, email password. Now, when I click on login, right, it prints it. So our form is now wired up. It's wired up with state variables. The thing that I want you to note over here is that look at the amount of boilerplate that you had to write, right? Like, if this was like a form that had 100 fields, it would be insane. Like you would have to create so many state variables, or you can have just one state variable for the entire form, but then you can't have nested, updates. So you won't be able to store things like child tables and stuff, right? Because child tables would change, but the component wouldn't re-render. And that's also not a good way to build forms in React in the first place, because this is stepping away from, HTML fundamentals. What I mean by that is just think about this particular, piece of code. If you were to compile this, what's actually happening is that React is looking at those inputs, right? Email and password. It's similar to if in JavaScript, what you did was you added event listeners, like on change event listeners to email and password fields, and then you maintain a variable, right? Whenever those variables change, you re-render the entire form, And when the submit button is hit, you take those variables and you send it wherever, right? Not very performant for the simple reason that all of this is handled by default by the browser, right? Even without this value and on change, this was still working fine, right? Like you could still type. All you need to know about the form state is when the form is submitted, right? When the user is typing, we do not render the entire form again and again, right? That's what React Hook Form solves for us, right? The other way to handle this is to not use value and on change, but take this form and say on submit and handle it from there, right? That's also a good way to deal with forms. But I see a lot of people, build forms like these. Works for a simple login page with just two fields. Doesn't really scale to very complex forms. So yeah, but let's try logging in. For that, first let's log out. Uh, uh, okay, so we have this hook in Frappe React SDK called use Frappe auth. Okay, let's look at the documentation for it, right? Hook to start listening to user state and provides functions to log in, log out. Is login page support responsive page, or we need to work on, I mean, you need to work on responsive, but in this case, it is responsive. Like, pretty sure this is responsive. See, I mean, technically it is responsive, but yeah, I mean, for any page, you would need to work on responsiveness yourself. You can do that using Tailwind, not a big deal. Okay, use Frappe auth hook to start listening to user state and provides functions to log in or log out, right? And it returns an object. So let's look at what all it returns. It returns the current user, right? In this case, the current user would be, actually, let's print all of these, right? Yeah, see, the current user is undefined because, well, we don't have a current user. It looks at the cookies first. If the cookies are found, then it returns, what the current user is. That's one. Then you can get the entire user cookie, right? So if you do this, oh, okay. Wait, I need to do that on a button call or something. Yeah. Okay. So, I need to print this as well. Yeah. So it's undefined, right? We don't really have a user cookie because we're not logged in. We wouldn't need user cookie for now. We only need to check current user, and there's something called as login, right? It's a function, and it takes some credentials. We need to pass this like email and password to the login function, right? And then there is loading, there is error. We don't need any of that for now. Let's actually take this email and password and pass it to the login function. So we've taken login from use Frappe auth, right? Open up an object because it takes a bunch of things you can see over here, right? But in this case, we only need to pass username and password. If you were using two-factor authentication, after passing in username and password, it will give you a temp ID. From that temp ID, and the user gets an OTP, right? From that temp ID, in the second call, the user would enter the OTP and you pass the temp ID as well, right? And that's how two-factor authentication works. So just keep that in mind. But the login function for now just takes in a username. Sorry. Username will be email, Password will be password. Let's see if this works. Let's look at our network, right? And let's log in. See, it actually, made that API call with user and name and password. The response was, message logged in, and the user is actually logged in now. If I refresh, in fact, let's do something. Let's say that if you have a current user, then don't render the form. Just say you're already logged in, right? So we say if you have a current user logged in as, else you render this entire card. See, logged in as, wait, oh, not current user dot name, sorry, just current user, logged in as administrator. And in fact, let's add a button over here that's used for logout. On click, we can just pass it logout. Logout doesn't really need anything, right? If I log out, see, now we have that working. Obviously, we are not routing it to anywhere, but this is essentially how it works. Does that make sense? I'll keep my code open just so that people can look at it. Is the technology React plus Frappe used for developing the same Frappe? No, Frappe HR's mobile app is built using Frappe UI. Yes, Frappe React SDK does work on React Native. You need to make a few changes, right? Pratmesh, can you share SWR's React Native configuration? So under the hood, Frappe React SDK uses something called as SWR, right? It's a stale while revalidate library, data fetching library by Vercel. Oh, in that we need to just change a few things, like SWR configuration changes a little bit, but then Frappe React SDK starts working. The other thing is that Frappe React SDK earlier did not work with Socket on React Native. That was a limitation on Frappe's part, right? Because Frappe did not support SocketIO events without like when you're authenticating with token-based auth. So that has now been fixed. We contributed that change. So now it will work with token-based auth as well. So Socket events will work now. And this is also true, like maybe Anupam would know. Anupam works at Wonderlab. So Anupam, in your case, you're using Firebase for authentication, right? And if you remember, we disabled Socket, right, on Frappe. So if you're using Frappe version 15 now, latest version, then you can enable Socket because it will work with tokens as well. So yeah, all in all, Frappe React SDK works on both React and React Native. In fact, our goal with Raven is that we first build a React Native app, and then all the data fetching part, etc. Right? We actually share between the two code bases. So the web app and the React Native app both share the same TypeScript type definitions as well as the data fetching part. That will significantly cut down, like 40% of the work will be shared between the two apps. So that's sort of our plan, long-term plan. Okay. Any more questions? Do you want to understand how use Frappe auth works? Under the hood, it's pretty simple. It's like just making the stupid API call. But let's see. Frappe React SDK. Yes. So Raven also has a mobile PWA. What you need to do is see a single page app by default is like a PWA, right? But if you want to like really enhance your PWA experience, you can use Wheat PWA plugin. That's what the error is coming because we are using Wheat PWA on Raven, and that's why it's caching that. So yeah, this Wheat PWA plugin, you can read the documentation, just add that to Wheat, and it will automatically generate a manifest and everything. And that's all it. That's all you need to actually make a progressive web app mobile app. So yeah, is there any documentation where I can learn about the SocketIO part for React Native? Uh, there is no extra configuration needed. Frappe React SDK will just work on React Native, so with SocketIO. So no extra configuration needed. Okay. Let's see. What was I going to cover? Yeah, use Frappe auth. So Frappe React SDK's documentation on GitHub might not be, that good, but the documentation within the code base itself is very well maintained. So this is use Frappe auth, right? Um, what it's doing is that, whenever the component mounts, right, it looks at uh, it gets the user cookie, and when the user cookie itself, sets the user ID over here. That's it. So we first check the cookies. Uh, it first checks the cookies in the browser. If the cookie is not guessed, right, then we know that it's an actual user. If the cookie is guessed, that means that the user is not logged in, right? That's all this is doing. That's one. Then we get the logged user, right? If there is a user, then we get the logged user, and the login functions as well as the logout function. The login function is nothing but login with username and password. Again, Frappe React SDK is built on top of Frappe JS SDK. In Frappe JS SDK, we're making that post call to log in with the username and password. And the logout is simple. We just call auth.logout. That's again in Frappe JS SDK. Make an API call to logout, update the current user, set the user ID to null, and that's pretty much it. That's the entire hook. Now the thing is that you don't have to wire any of this up, right? Because it works. If you're using token-based auth, this you don't really need to do this in the first place because your authentication will be handled separately. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. We were able to get a login page done. Tomorrow, first thing, we'll actually set up routing using React Router and then go from there. So maybe, instead of showing this, what we'll do is that if the user is logged in, show a separate page. If the user is logged out, show the login page. That's what we'll do tomorrow. So any questions? The mobile app, it's still a work in progress. I would say another 3 months probably. So Raven mobile app, hopefully by the time of Frappeverse, it would be ready. So any questions? Like, just be free to ask. And if there's any feedback, like you want me to go slow, you want me to go fast, I don't think that anyone wants me to go faster. But if there's any feedback, just share that in the chat or, on the call. Okay, how to use OAuth? Good question. So now, yes, okay, I can. So how to use OAuth? I'll cover that first. So depends. How are you handling OAuth in the first place, right? Are you serving the React app with your Frappe site? So if your Frappe site runs on example.com, your React app is also on example.com/test, something like that, like Raven runs. Yeah. If that's the case, you look at Raven's login page. This was made by Prathamesh. So, see, for OAuth, you really don't need to do anything because all you need is that URL that you need to redirect the user to. Maybe it's a Google URL or whatever, right? So that we have done over here. Yeah, provider logins. Yeah, see, we get an auth URL. This is exactly how Frappe's login page is also set up. We created an API that actually fetches the all the social media logins. The social, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Rafael, it's social login key, right? Wherein you set up all the OAuth providers, like Google,
Yes.
Facebook, etc. So there's this, on the Frappe code base itself, in the login.py file, there will be like a context. It sets the context by setting, by fetching all of those URLs. We only need to redirect the user to that auth URL, right? And then automatically Google or Facebook or whatever, they'll redirect back, to this site. Uh, and the way that would work is that once Frappe authenticates those bearer tokens that is received from Facebook or Google or whatever your OAuth provider is, it actually sets the cookie, right, in the response. And so after that, it's the same thing, right? So I would recommend looking at Raven's login page. It supports two-factor authentication, login with username, uh, login with email magic link, uh, I don't know, social login. I think the only thing that we do not support is LDAP, right? For that, people will have to go back to the Frappe interface, log in from there, and then go to Raven. But yeah, this is pretty much all the login methods that we have. If there's extra time, you could explain setting up the HTTPS part. What do you mean by the HTTPS part? Uh, so I'm assuming you're not using. Are you talking about React Native specifically or just React? Because then if you're using Frappe Cloud, all of that's handled for you. If you're using like self-hosting Frappe, then there is a guide on setting up HTTPS using DNS multi-tenancy. You set up DNS multi-tenancy, you set up your domains. Yeah, there's a guide. Just search for Frappe setup HTTPS. You just need to give it the path to your certificate, and then set it up, and then it will configure the configuration in Nginx. Uh, so that should do it. Yeah, I'll share the link. Uh, if anyone's interested, they can join the chat on Frappe School, right? I will share the links over here as well. Frappe School, I don't know my username and password. Hmm. Okay, I'll have to check. But yeah, just join the chat at chat.frappe.school, right? And I'll create a channel for everyone for this batch, and we'll share the links of the recordings over there as well. What is my password? I don't know. Hmm. Okay, I think that's it for today. If you have any questions, again, hit me up on chat.fiber.school. I'll create a channel, send a message over there. Try recreating what we did today, right, on your local machines. And yeah, we'll meet again tomorrow.
Thanks, Nikhil. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you tomorrow.
Thanks, Nikhil.
Thanks, Nikhil.
Thanks, Nikhil.